Rich soil has sent shoots up from underneath, birthing both the great oaks and the small tree heath, wood cut and processed to make a gathering place where chairs are pushed tight together around the space. The black and white sit comfortably upon each cushioned seat, chomping fried chicken and sipping tea in the Georgia heat. White and black children skip up, laughing and clasping hands for sweet cakes and pies prepared by each of their clans. Such peace and love of which the world thought us unable when we sit in brotherhood around this Dr. King's table. I am naturally a very scared person. No one took more advantage of this growing up than my own father, who thought it was hilarious. My family would get together and they would watch old Motown videos, and we would sing on Friday nights, and we would also watch Michael Jackson videos. And whenever the Thriller video came, I would run immediately to the kitchen because it was just too scary to see Michael Jackson dancing. My father would come and fish me out of the kitchen. He would say, "Son, they're only dancing," but what I thought they were literal monsters. And monsters are scary enough still, let alone dancing synchronized. And so whenever I see them, I'm freaking out. I'm literally hearing his words, "Grisly ghouls from every tomb closing in to seal your doom." I'm thinking, they're talking about me. They're gonna close in to seal my doom. In addition to that, I was also quite over-exaggerative and dramatic, and so that did not help. I would faint, not even with a fainting couch. No fainting couch required. I would just fall there on the ground, big and bold enough to hit the floor, but not big and bold enough to do much else in my life. I remember whenever my brother's girlfriend at the time, who he's now married to, we would go over to her family's house because we were very close with that family, and they saved a small kitten. When they saved this small kitten and brought it into the house from the streets, I remember standing there on the other side of the room thinking to myself, there's a wild beast in the house. You see, Mother would not have allowed us to have animals in the house, you see, because Mother always knew that animals cost money and they keep everything dirty, and my brother and I, we did that well all by ourselves. So we were not accustomed to having animals in the house. And so now we have these animals in the house. I'm looking at this kitten. It grows up, and I remember just laying there watching television in their living room, lying on the floor, and this kitten turned into a cat, which was literally a hunting machine. I would be pounced upon. And so then, this makes it interesting because I think much later, years later, if I really would have married my wife if I had known that she was such a cat lover, I wonder if I would have just rethought the whole thing and said, I don't. She fought for years. She said, I love cats. I would like to bring a cat into our home. And I said no. It was hard because her mother and her used to save cats, and her mother passed away. And so it was very meaningful to her. But you see, not even the memory of her mother could make me want to live under that amount of stress and threat every single day. And so finally, I felt so bad, I just felt that I needed to man up and be the husband that she thought she married. And so I said, Haley, we're going to consider getting a cat. We are going to think about it because I think I want to come out of this. And so then I made the mistake of going out of town. And when I return, I find this furry black substance in the corner of my dining room. And it turns out to be a feline. As I'm about to convince my wife to take it back to the Humane Society where she rescued it, it gets up and walks away, revealing that it only has 3 legs. And you see, I know she did this on purpose because she knows that I have a heart for the broken. And she knows that I would not send back a handicapped, or what we prefer, handy-capable cat. And so then I lived in fear for years. And here I am in my own home. Now, luckily, the cat would sleep for the first several months underneath a bookcase, and she would never come out. But when she first came out, I told my wife, I said, babe, what's all this? The cat's moving about the house all freely. I thought that she was going to live her whole life underneath the bookcase. As it turned out, I conquered my fears. I remember whenever she would first meow, me not being very familiar with cats and very sketchy of them, she just called herself meowing. What I heard was the roar of an ancient prehistoric saber-toothed tiger. But as it turns out, time went on, and we became close. We named her Bella, and we actually love our cat. Not just my wife, but also me. Rich soil has sent shoots up from underneath, birthing both the great oaks and the small tree heath, wood cut and processed to make a gathering place where chairs are pushed together tight around the space. The black and white sit comfortably upon each cushion's sheet, chomping fried chicken and sipping tea in the Georgia heat. White and black children skip up, laughing and clasping hands for sweet cakes and pies prepared by each of their clans. Such peace and love of which the world thought us unable when we sit in brotherhood around this Dr. King's table. Mike Brown was shot and killed August 9th, 2014 in Ferguson, Missouri, a northern suburb of St. Louis. Whose fault that was, you should decide for yourself. The report said that the police officer that shot him, a white man, was at fault for using too quick decision and excessive force. And other report says that Mike himself was at fault for resisting and not obeying the orders given to him. At any rate, whatever you decide, my prayers and my love goes out to each family that's involved. There are two sides to that argument. Either the police officer is a racist or the young black man is a hardened criminal. And of course, we can say here, without having the time to discuss it very far, that it is possible for the police officer to be racist, and there are, in fact, racist police officers. To say that that's not possible is really nonsensical. Police officers can be racist because they're Americans, and each American has the prerogative to be racist. And to say that racism doesn't exist today is not only wrong, but also insensitive. On the other hand, on the other side of that argument, whenever young black men or young minorities are faced with these types of situations, we can believe that many times they are completely innocent. But to say that they are never guilty, to say that they never add to the problem, is also just as wrong and just as insensitive. But what we can see is a deeper truth, and it's this deeper truth that I would like Americans to try to grapple with. You see, whenever I lived in St. Louis, I worked and I lived in Ferguson and the surrounding areas. And so then when people bring me in to talk on these things or to speak about subjects like the one I'm speaking about now, they are wanting to hear great stories. They're wanting me to say something very outlandish so that they can really picture what happened. They expect me to have driven down the streets in Ferguson and to see bodies lynched, to see crosses burning, to see riots in the streets for justice. But that was not the case. In fact, the only thing I really saw was separatism. I saw a strict separation. I remember whenever I would drive from one side of town to the other, after leaving one of my jobs, I would drive across town. By the time I got to Ferguson, it was interesting, because around 3 p.m., the schools are being dismissed. And on one street, there were young black kids walking with their backpacks in hand, laughing and joking. And just one street over, just one block over, there were white children walking with their backpacks, laughing and talking. It was as if there were two worlds living side by side, but never coming together, never even interacting with each other. I was not at all surprised whenever I moved to Memphis, Tennessee, and I saw that the same thing that Ferguson and St. Louis struggled with, Memphis struggled with as well. And so then when we think about this tragic shooting, we can never know exactly what happened. But I can know one of the deeper problems that led to something so tragic. This problem is separatism, and it's a literal formula. The problem of separatism is formulaic. It has an outworking. You see, where there is separatism, separatism leads to ignorance. And then where there's ignorance, ignorance leads to fear. And then where there is fear, fear leads to poor decisions. And then finally, if you have enough poor decisions, if you add them up enough, that leads to the destruction of a society. There's no better proof than Bella, the three-legged cat, who my friend calls Tripod. Of course, I was separated from cats and animals in general. And so then that separation, with the exception of a couple of bad experiences, made me ignorant of how they move, ignorant of how they operate. And so then that ignorance led to me being afraid, even when the cat was not a threat. And of course, when I'm afraid, I could make poor decisions, which would lead me to treat the cat more harshly than I should as the cat's caretaker. And so then we see that this is a trivial type of example, a trivial illustration, but maybe there is some insight and some deeper implications that we can give. Rich soil has sent shoots up from underneath, birthing both the great oaks and the small tree heath. Wood cut and processed to make a gathering place where chairs are pushed together tight around the space. The black and white sit comfortably upon each cushioned seat, chomping fried chicken and sipping tea in the Georgia heat. White and black children skip up, laughing and clasping hands for sweet cakes and pies prepared by each of their clans. Oh, such peace and love, of which the world thought us unable when we sit in brotherhood around this Dr. King's table. Perhaps this story of my cat, perhaps Bella, the three-legged animal, and my interaction with her could also have some type of deeper implication that could help us to maybe sort through or at least consider some missing components when looking and observing the types of situations between young black minorities and white police officers. You see, some white police officers do not congregate often with black men, and this makes them separate. Therefore, they are ignorant of how black men operate. Their separatism leads to ignorance, and so then if they're ignorant of how black man operates, then they may think that this young black man is doing something that's threatening when in fact it's not. You see, if a white police officer were to see a young white man doing the same thing, that white police officer may interact differently because he's familiar, and so then he's not as ignorant. And so if it's not ignorant, he is rather not afraid. The reality is, the police officer may well have been a racist. The police officer in any of these situations may well have been racist. Or the police officer may well have been separate and just unfamiliar. In the same way, when we have this separatism, it then eventually leads to ignorance, and then this ignorance leads to fear. And so then some black young men or minority young men are not as familiar with the way that white officers do things or white culture in general. And so then they, in their separateness, will be ignorant of how things go here in this space that they have found themselves in. And so then they become afraid. They interpret the police's actions as fear-inducing. And so some people deal with fear by running in flight or by staying in fight. And so the reality is sometimes these young minorities, they may well be hardened criminals, or they literally may just be scared. And so then when we become afraid, many of us begin to act rashly. We don't think as clear as we know that we need to think. And so that's why in some of these situations, a gun is pulled too quickly. That's why in some of these situations, we are resisting arrest. It's because whenever we're afraid, then we start to act out in very unfortunate ways. And so then both parties, really, one could be completely racist, or the other could be literally a hardened criminal, or both may be genuinely afraid. And this all starts with separation. This is the outworking. Separation leads to ignorance, then ignorance to fear, then fear to poor decisions. And if you add up enough of those poor decisions, it leads to destruction. Whenever you turn on your television and you see someone else shot, someone else's family up in arms because their family member who's a police officer has been drugged into this battle, the family of the slain, when it just becomes normal to see these things. We are really looking at a society that is slowly being destroyed. And it was this slow destruction that Dr. Martin Luther King spoke against in his delivery of his I Have a Dream speech given on August 28, 1963. Acknowledging separation and how it can lead to all of these terrible things, Dr. King says this in that speech: I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at a table of brotherhood. You see, there is a lot to be gained when we sit down at the table of brotherhood and we listen to each other. In so doing, we never become less of ourselves. We never have to stop being black or stop being white or stop being a man or stop being a woman, because to be either of those things is beautiful. Whiteness is too beautiful. Blackness is too beautiful. Hispanicness is too beautiful. The female and the male, they're too beautiful. The young and the old, it's too beautiful. We don't want to cease being those things. We only want to sit down and come to know each other, sit down across the table and share a meal of love, peace, and respect. We don't want to learn about it on television or in the news, but we want to learn face to face. We need to close this gap of separation, because less separation means less ignorance, and less ignorance means less fear. Less fear means fewer poor decisions, and fewer poor decisions mean that we could save the destruction of our society. Dr. King was gunned down in Memphis, Tennessee, on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. And as we come upon the 50th anniversary of that event, we can honor his legacy by remembering his dream. Because I know that whenever he fell down dead on the metal of that balcony, he was still gripping tight to that dream. I feel that if we can help community organizations or schools or universities, all religious institutions, if we can help in any way, pull everyone to the table and have conversations and purposeful interactions where we interact more with those who are different than us, we may just end up making Dr. King's dream a reality. Rich soil has sent shoots up from underneath, birthing both great oaks and the small tree heath. Wood cut and processed to make a gathering place where chairs are pushed together tight around the space. The black and white sit comfortably upon each cushioned seat, chomping fried chicken and sipping tea in the Georgia heat. White and black children skip up, laughing and clasping hands for sweet cakes and pies prepared by each of their clans. Such peace and love of which the world thought us unable when we sit in brotherhood around this Dr. King's table. Thank you.